Welcome to episode 2 of Rugby in a Different Light. And once again, we are joined by our 3 eminent guests, bringing you the inside story of everything to do with rugby. So let's start with some introductions. We've got Bruce Aitchison, our super fan, player, coach, school teacher, rugby announcer. He's not only a well-known face in Scottish rugby, by the way. He hosts gala evenings, webcasts, podcasts, and I'm sure many of you out there will know his smooth voice as the stadium announcer for Edinburgh Rugby. His social media site, Happiness is Egg-Shaped, has passed 20,000 followers now. But Bruce also has a long list of global playing and coaching credentials, from Scotland under-18 and under-19 caps through to 4 years as captain of Kowloon Rugby Football Club and a stint playing for the Albany Knickerbockers in USA in 2001. Coaching, again, what a list, picking a few. Murrayfield Wanderers Rugby Football Club, runners-up in the National Shield. Head coach at Boroughmuir Rugby Football Club, winning the National League and BT Scottish Cup. He's now housemaster at Merchiston Castle School in Edinburgh, a leading rugby school in Scotland. So you can see there, I had to pluck a few of the long list out of his CV, which honestly, that CV should be illegal, the amount of paper it used when I printed it. But don't worry, I've offset my carbon footprint by planting a tree in the garden in your memory, Bruce. Moving over to Owain Jones, our resident journalist. Owain has been writing and editing about rugby since 2004. He's edited matchday programmes for the WRU publications. British and Irish Lions, he's written for the Guinness Pro 14, and he's a regular voice on BBC Radio Wales. He's been writing for Rugby Pass since 2019, and he's currently the Northern Hemisphere editor of The 15, an online rugby journal. And his contact list is a who's who of world rugby over the last 20 years. When he's away from his desk, he's obsessed with Liverpool Football Club, gadgets, although having spent many hours on the phone with him, I'm not sure that can be true, and waxing lyrical about growing up in Cardiff, as we found out. But he's also not the best at picking Lions captains, but we'll come back to that. And finally, Rachael Burford, our professional and title winner. Rachael is an England World Cup winner and captain. She capped England over 100 times at both 15s and 7s. And in the club scene, joined Harlequins as captain in 2017. Off the rugby field, she's founded the Girls Rugby Club, a global platform aimed at providing a pathway for girls and women in rugby. And in April 2016, she became the first female professional player to be elected to the Rugby Players Association Players Board and sits on 2 World Rugby Advisory Committees. Rachael first picked up the ball at the age of 6 and later played in the same team as her mum and sister, which must have been amazing, at Medway Rugby Football Club. So I'm sure they're tuning in. And since the first pod, Rachael captained Harlequins women to victory in the Premiership title, defeating Saracens 25-17 in what was a brilliant final at Kingsholm. Unfortunately, after taking the lead, you had to leave the field with a knee injury. So we can't move on without asking, how's the knee now, Rachael? Is it coming on?
Yeah, no, it is. Delighted to obviously get the win, but a bit of bittersweet coming off quite early. I had surgery a couple of weeks ago, and yeah, like I'm all on track. It was a bigger surgery than I anticipated, but yeah, on track and progress is good so far. So, just got to take one day as it comes and hope to stay on track, really.
Well, we'll speak a bit more about the injuries and those kind of things coming up in the pod. But before we go on, we've got to start with the Lions captain picks from the last episode. So for those who don't remember or hadn't tuned into episode 1, the picks were, Rachael, you had Hoggy. Thoughts on that?
I put myself out there because I didn't go for the obvious. I thought, you know what, I'd start up a little bit of a chat, get some thoughts going. And Hoggy is a very good leader, so it wasn't a bad shout. And, maybe he'll be in that VC role.
Proving that you're a leader, not a follower, I think is what you're saying, Rachael. I think that's what that's about. So Bruce, you were lucky. You got sort of first pick, I think, but it looks like you were spot on with Owain Jones. And are you feeling good about that?
Yeah, I love how Burf justifies it, getting it wrong by saying she just tried to be different. That's absolute gold. Alan Wynne if he hadn't had the Six Nations he'd had, I don't think that would have been so obvious. But because he was so successful and he's been there before and he's been round the block, it was the obvious choice. And seeing how they've enjoyed their little holiday in Jersey, he looks like he's ready to paddleboard there and then take them on when he gets there. He just looks like he's absolutely up for it. And I think the pictures that we've seen, and obviously social media is sometimes a false window into what's actually happening. He looks like he's very, very happy and comfortable in his surroundings. So hopefully that all bodes well.
And Owain, Maro Itoje, what happened there, fella?
I would like to re-see that tape because I thought I'd said Owain Jones, Mark.
You tried to, but you couldn't have the same person. Do you remember? So you had to pick someone else. I think that's how it worked.
Oh well, let's use captain of the Lions by the end of the series. We hope Alan Wynne stays in one piece. But if you remember, 2013, I think Alan Wynne Jones carried the Lions home because Sam Warburton was injured for the final test. So maybe Maro will take over. But yeah, look, if I did say that, then I'll happily admit it. But yeah, both fine players.
We did check the tape, so it's not like we have to go back. We actually checked the tapes. But anyway, moving forward swiftly then, Bruce, this is your moment to shine, because I think if I was right, the deal was that if you won, the others had to have a Scotland rugby ball in the background for the next pod. So how's it feel to be a winner?
Well, I'm just looking forward to both of them putting on a Scottish accent, because that's going to be the real challenge. Forget the rugby ball. I want to hear Burf and Owain give us their full-on Scottish accents.
Well, do you want it now? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. So Rachel, why wait?
You go first. Let's have your best Scottish accent then.
Let's give us your best Jade Conkle. Give us your best Jade Conkle.
I'm trying to think of some of the sayings that you guys say.
How about and retaining the Calcutta Cup, Scotland?
Can't say that. Can't say that.
How about welcoming the Lions into the?
Whoa! Like, you're making a very long sentence here. I was going for like one or two words. Owain, you're ready. You look ready.
Oh, I don't know.
Owen's all over this. Come on, then, Owain.
Never ready. I say, Owain Jones, shaken not stirred, is my pathetic Sean Connery accent.
It's the go-to for a Scottish accent, I think, there, isn't it?
I thought we were just having a ball instead of an accent.
Yeah, I don't know how.
I don't know where the ball came in. We just thought we'd run with it because it was Bruce's winning request, you know. But let's move swiftly on then. So today, first up,
I got away with that.
You got away with it. We'll come back to you, don't you worry. So today, first up, what we wanted to talk about was, as a parent of a 4-year-old with better rugby skills than me already, and he goes to sort of Little Ruggers, which is a sort of a smaller children rugby sort of session every week. What has the game given us, and how do we sell it to parents so that we can get more and more people involved? And let's start that with, let's go to you, Rachel.
Well, I think there's so many things that you could draw upon. You know, certainly from my own personal experiences, the opportunities that it gives you, that sport gives you, and the lessons it learns, you learn from it, has always been something that I've always encouraged parents to give the kids the opportunity to get involved, because we can talk, like, you know, discipline, respect, teamwork, you know, all of those things. But I think it's kind of the environment that really does challenge young kids, but in the really right ways, and gives them the opportunity to kind of excel and learn in their own way, learn at their own pace. And I think there just has so many different opportunities for young kids to get involved in. It's quite hard to draw the negatives, because you could look at injuries and things like that, but that can happen in any part of life, any sport. And I find it kind of difficult to ever draw kind of why wouldn't you want your kids to be involved in the actual sport?
It's amazing, isn't it? Because one of the things that I've seen is it creates lots of different ways of sort of abilities. You learn to catch, you learn to throw, you learn to kick, drop kick, punt, run, dodge. I mean, there's so much in rugby, isn't there? So, Bruce, you've been involved in coaching a lot with youngsters. What do you see it giving to the younger generations, and what should we be doing to kind of sell that more to parents?
I think there's two arms to this. One is what the kids want, which bottom line is fun. And I use fun really precisely because to me, fun is something that kids experience in things they enjoy. For adult players, quite often you wouldn't really talk about fun, but you talk about enjoyment. And I think there is a distinction there. But kids need to feel that sense of fun. Otherwise, it's very easy to put it down and pick up something else. So any session that kids come to has to be fun. And it kills me when I see kids lined up along the goal line doing high knees and lunges and all those kind of things in warm-ups when all they really want to do is play. Having been a PE teacher for almost 20 years, the first question kids ask when they come into the games hall or onto the pitch is, do we get a game today? Are we getting to play? And teachers and coaches have quite often overcomplicated things with the game is the reward at the end of the day. And that is difficult because the game should be used all the way through. So I think the kids want fun and they want to play games. Parents then need to see what the other bits are to this. And they want their kid to get back in the car and be buzzing about the stories and talk about the person they've met, about how hard they've worked, about the things that they've learned. So that's when we bring in, like Burf was talking about, the values and some of the other skills that they can use. Rugby is quite a specific game let's face it, it's ridiculous. Pass backwards, run forwards. I mean, where on earth do you get that nonsense? But with that comes unique skills like passing, like the way we kick. But that can't be it, because for lots of the kids, they're not there to become rugby players. So we need them to work with others, communicate effectively, understand their role, take responsibility. So we have all those other skills that we want them to take forward, and we can't all become international rugby players. So what is it that we're doing? If a very small percentage become professionals, then do we just cater to that small percentage, or do we cater to everyone? And hopefully, by catering to everyone, then we're going to build those bases of skills and of qualities and of confident kids who are willing to transfer that into other areas of their life. And I've tried to distill the involvement for kids because I'm asked it often, and parents especially need to hear it. So my sort of motto for it is that we build relationships, we share experiences, we go places, and we make memories.
And Owain, you must have sort of come across lots of stuff going on in the younger generation of rugby as well. What is it that sort of really stands out for you?
Well, like Burf and probably Bruce, I started playing rugby at the age of 6. There was kind of no other choice. My dad had played, his dad had played, so just the next place you go, my son's playing. So you're seeing a theme here. I was lucky. I liked the physical confrontation. I liked kind of smashing into other kids. That was kind of made my kind of Sunday mornings, if I'm honest. We can't say it's for absolutely everybody, but again, for some of those children who maybe don't feel kind of academic school lessons are really what floats their boat, I would sit there looking out longingly at a rugby field for most of my school kind of career, desperate to get out there. And I think it's just what it shaped me, as I'm sure it shaped the other guys, in sociability, and sometimes picking yourself up when you're down. I think, being able to lose magnanimously, can translate into kind of real life. There's that sense of family that you get. We are all a team. I'm coaching 45 kind of under 14 stroke under 15 year olds at Hitchin here. Just feeling that sense of belonging. We live in a increasingly fractured society, and just feeling somewhere safe that they can come, have a laugh, get out there, have a run around, hone their skills. It is a ridiculously technical game. I mean, even journalist players sometimes struggle with kind of the latest kind of rule interpretations. But I'll go back to something that Tom Wood, I think the 51 cap England flanker, said is he's 34 and he just likes running around after a ball. Well, I think that's beautiful. that is just summing up rugby and the appeal of it very succinctly. It is, again, as we said, about having fun.
And Rachel, going back to when you first started, what sort of age did you get into rugby?
So yeah, I was around 6 years old when I started playing, and it was basically as soon as I could, because my mum played, my dad played, my sister played, and I just wanted to do what they were doing. And at the time, I was also doing dance, and my mum was like, "Look, you're gonna have to choose because they're on the same day." And excuse me, and I'd never looked back. It was like rugby all the way. Didn't want to change from that, and it all comes down to that enjoyment.
But let's just go back to that. So you're 6 years old. You started off, you know, as a youngster. What sort of sparked that to keep you going, and how did you go from there right the way through? Were you really gifted at it from day one?
I think I definitely had something, but it genuinely was about having fun. Like, I was in an all boys team, so I found it quite challenging at the start until my dad was kind of like, well, just go get the ball. If they're not going to give it to you, just go and get it. And then when they started to show respect and almost, you know, want me in their team, and the coaches played such a big part in that, because they would always be like using me as a demonstrator, being like, we all need to tackle like Rachel does. So if she can do it, you lot need to step up. So always instilling that confidence and that belief in myself then allowed me to relax and enjoy my rugby. And I just loved playing. I loved going around. I loved passing the ball around. Like, whenever I was on the sideline, I would always have a rugby ball in my hands. And that just carried all the way through my teens, and into kind of real young. Like, when I was around 16, 17, there was a small group of us, me, Amy Turner, Claire Allen. Any opportunity we'd get, we'd want to play rugby, and we'd want to pass a ball around together and train. And I think that just all stems from that enjoyment and just having fun week in, week out. And our coaches, we used to do this, is so not allowed to do it. After a game or a festival, we used to lay on this bank, all the kids, and we used to lay with our mouths open. They used to come pour Shandy in our mouths. They used to call Shandy on the bank. I doubt it was even Shandy, do you know what I mean? But they used to tell us that. But just like moments like that, and like singing in the back of the bus on the way back from a festival, just all those are like my best memories. And what kept me always going back was to be a part of that team and do things like that together. You know, and that carries on all the way through.
We just want to say that was pre the Children's Act,
yes,
just so that everybody knows. And we'll move swiftly on. Those coaches are no.
There's far worse stories out there than that.
So let's move on swiftly. You know, as you sort of progress through, a lot of people kind of choose not to continue with the rugby when they get to uni, or perhaps when they go on to do their A levels at college or whatever. But what does rugby keep giving you when you move into adulthood? And let's start with Owain on this one.
Well, my dodgy knee kind of curtailed my professional rugby career. Not that I was ever going to get there, but it wasn't too shabby. But yeah, kind of 18, 19, and then I became from actually aspiring to get somewhere to really social rugby. But yeah, it's just, again, there's no kind of real difference between kind of childhood rugby and adult rugby, because it is about going out and having a crack and you know, trying to win a game. I think, you know, yeah, injury does kind of curtail some aspirations, but I personally don't regret that for a second. You know, for all the, you know, dislocated shoulders, broken noses, smashed up knees, you know, I don't regret any of it, because I think if you think like a rugby player, you know, you don't want to have grown up in a paper bag, not taking any risks. I've got, you know, so many scars. But yeah, it's just getting together and yeah, the social side of it is, you know, going out for beers, you know, feeling like you've deserved, you know, a drink after a game of rugby is everything. And, you know, and handing it down to the next generation, it just is absolutely in the DNA. And, you know, I'm from South Wales. I'd kick a ball behind us with the sheep. I'm saying a male voice choir wasn't far away in a coal mine. It sounded as Welsh as you can sound. But, you know, that was kind of, it's almost like there was no other way. And, you know, to this day, and now as I'm getting into my dotage, I just absolutely love the game.
Bruce, you've got a long history of playing, coaching, you know, being a teacher in a school that rugby's really important. What's it given you, you know, when you went into adulthood?
Well, I think both Burf and Owain have already spoken about their memories, and not many of them are actually things that happened on the pitch, because we spend a lot longer in the game doing other things, in training, on the bus, with your mates on the way to and from places, in the pub after, doing all those things. So a lot of the memories that we make are actually off the field. I think there's only 2 or 3 games I've ever played in that I can remember the result from. So sometimes the thing that we hang our hat on is the most important, and it always makes my skin crawl when people tell me that they're a winner, or I hear people saying, oh, they're a winner. Because to be a winner, somebody else has to be a loser, and I'm pretty confident most of those people have lost at some point. But the bit that it's given me, and the reason I've kept going, a bit like Owain, I could have been a contender, but for dodgy knees as well. But I kept going because I don't go to the pub. That's not my social scene. My social scene was being at training on a Tuesday and a Thursday night, and turning up early on the Saturday, a bit like Burf. I couldn't wait to have somebody to catch the ball when I was kicking or throwing the ball around. And I take my dog for a walk as a 42-year-old man with a rugby ball, and people must look at me thinking, who's this crazy guy? But I'm throwing the ball to myself, and I'm kicking, and I'm doing all sorts while I take the dog for a walk, because I just love it. And a bit like Tom Wood, I just like to chase a ball and be playing with the ball. But those relationships that we build, you know, Burf talking about people she grew up with playing, and I'm sure Owen's got a long list of people that he was able to create a memory with that is only in his head and his heart, and not necessarily captured on social media or in an article that he's written. And those are the moments that are so special. You know, I think we've spoken before, cameras in the changing room should be banned, because that's players' time. That is the bit that lots of people talk about they miss the most, whether they're a professional or not. My playing days are gone, but whenever anyone calls up to say we've got an old boys game, are you keen? They've not even finished the question before I've said yes. And the bit that I actually want to be part of is the changing room, the nonsense that goes on, the nervousness, the chatter, the absolute head case banging his head against the door, and then somebody else being sick and others laughing and joking, and just seeing people at their most vulnerable, and also sometimes at their very strongest, and making a speech that makes people beat their chest and get ready to go out, or, you know, consoling somebody in a dark moment, or sharing a beer with somebody in celebration. Those are things that you can't put a cost on. And it's actually quite a difficult thing to sell to a parent, because unless you felt it, it's actually a difficult thing to quantify or put a price on. So those moments, you know, Owain talking about his dad and his dad before him, that's why he wanted to do it, and hopefully why his kids want to do it, because they can see the benefit. Attracting new people is the big challenge, because the game is bloody complicated. What they watch on the field is difficult to understand, but hopefully what is easy to understand is the welcome they receive, how we're inclusive, how we build relationships, we share experiences, we look after each other, and we have a bloody good time while we're doing it.
And obviously, you know, for a lot of parents and then for players themselves, it's really important now about player welfare. And you know, even after your 25-17 win, Rachel, obviously you've had the knee injury. So is there enough being done on player load and all of that kind of psychological protection that comes with that?
Well, I think there's 2 ways to answer this. If I answer from a women's perspective, there's probably not enough going on in terms of research and data at the moment to really understand it, to then also have considerable measures in place to make sure we are protecting the best that we can. But I do think that rugby is the most proactive sport in looking and researching into the likes of concussion, player load, contact, and where there are gaps, when it's questioned, they're going after the answers and trying to find. They're not kind of putting it in a box and going, oh, well, we'll deal with that another day when it pops up. They're trying to be more proactive about it. But back to my point earlier about injuries, and, you know, things can happen, but they can also happen away from the game, you know, not playing sport. There's far more other dangerous sports out there, and it's not to kind of, you know, put one against the other, but it's about weighing the risk with the reward. And certainly, you know, we're all sitting here, all have done our knees and our shoulders and noses and things like that, but yet given a chance, we'd be straight back on the pitch. And so that kind of must highlight to parents and to new people into our sport just how special it is, because if you go through all that trauma but yet you still want to keep getting your boots back on and being part of it, so yeah, I think there is a tremendous amount more to be done, but we're definitely, I would say, one of the most leading sports in the area of player welfare and trying to make sure that we have the right measures in place and that we're listening to players a lot more now and trying to understand their concerns. So yeah, I think relatively our sport is in a good place.
And Owen, do you see that it's becoming more and more talked about in the sort of by journalists now, all of the kind of effects of playing rugby has on the body and the mind?
Oh, massively. It's a huge subject. I mean, we're all going to say, you know, the elephant in the room is kind of brain injury, concussion. I think Premiership Rugby have, you know, undertaken, you know, quite a long-term injury audit. I think World Rugby have also got lots of data there, very much data-led there, won't be led by something happening on the weekend and a huge kind of gut reaction. They are going to go a bit like government scientists on the data over injuries, you know, for knee injuries, shoulder injuries, head injuries. Saying that, it is very, very difficult when you are a player, and Rachel knows this better than anybody. You are, you know, big, strong, powerful, fit, and injuries will happen. There is no way rugby is going to turn into a sport where there will be no injuries. But as we've also already said, if you then take up horse riding, you come off a horse. If you become a skier, you could land on your backside. I've done that one already pretty well. You know, with football, break a leg. You know, if you seek a little bit of adrenaline, if you want to play a contact sport, it is very, very difficult to avoid. You know, I've done a column with Ben Kay and the technicalities over the tackle, and there are just so many opportunities where you can get a bang, but by the same token, you know, large percentage of people will leave the field and dust themselves down and will be okay to play again. And yes, we've always got to look ahead and look at how we can minimize the kind of the injury risk. But I don't think we're just ever going to be in a place where we can say to the 500,000, you know, school kids, oh, your child is never going to come home without a bump or a bruise. It's just unrealistic. So yeah, I said things are being done. You know, football, I think it was in the Euros. One of the players was concussed for a few seconds, it looked like, and he just got up and carried on. Even in the Southern Hemisphere, it looks like the Northern Hemisphere is the furthest progressed, certainly in the messaging. But I said there's more work to do. But yeah, I think, you know, rugby's trying to be as responsible as it can.
And Bruce, you must see this all the time. You know, obviously, in day-to-day contact with students who are playing rugby and your wider sort of rugby sort of scene. How do you think it's working with youngsters and then progressing through into adulthood that we're keeping them safe?
I think there's a lot done for under 18s, and that's to do with the physical aspects. The issue I have is that a lot of coaches want to coach to make their game look like the professional game. And schoolboy rugby and under 18 rugby could and should be something different from that. You know, there's lots to talk about there about how we develop players and players coming through the academies. But in the last 2 years, there's been so many young players that have emerged through various ways, whether that be in the Premiership or Pro 14, or some of the players that are coming through in Super Rugby in the Southern Hemisphere. And they look like they have no fear. They have a high skill level. They're unbelievably physically fit. And those are the people that are exciting to watch. Those are the people that we can use to sell the game. The downside to that is we're very quickly becoming a game that is not for all shapes and sizes. When it comes down to a good big one or a good little one, the good big one's always going to win. And that can be difficult, because although we make a big deal of that as a game of rugby, if you watch the professional game, actually, there's not too many little people. Or there's not too many tall, skinny people, or there's not too many. So that's becoming a more difficult sell. The great thing about schoolboy rugby is that it probably looks like the game we all want it to look like. There is a role for everyone, and the kids can fill in and take different positions without demanding that they are this player. You know, players jump from the forwards to the backs and they're absolutely delighted, while they go kicking and screaming the other way. They still tend to do it with a bit of enthusiasm, and they just enjoy it because they're there to play. They all pass, they all kick, they all tackle, they all run, because they're kids and they should do all things. The difficulty then comes for me is that aspiration to be a professional rugby player. And there are schools, and I'm in one who has a great history of producing players for the professional game, but that is a very small minority. So one of the bigger jobs, and this is not necessarily on player load, but certainly on player welfare, is making sure the expectations of both player and parent is realistic, but also that we're matching up that desire to be an elite performer with enjoying what you're doing and enjoying the process and taking all the benefits that come before you're a professional. And if you are, and there is a huge amount of luck involved in it, if you are lucky enough to become a professional, that you're doing it because you love it and because you enjoy it. And I know people, I know professional rugby players who haven't enjoyed it. I know players who have walked away from the game saying that they wish they'd never done it, but it was the thing that they found they were very good at, and very quickly became an academy player and a professional player, and all of a sudden they were 24 and a professional rugby player. So the managing of well-being for me is actually the greater concern, because it's something that we could deal with quite quickly. The kids leave school having had a guidance teacher or a counsellor, or like myself, a housemaster. They go into professional sport and they have lots of people to look after their physical health and well-being, but not necessarily their mental and emotional well-being. And for me, that's probably the more instant progress we could make very, very quickly. But unfortunately, these things take money and resources and time, and those are things that are all being squeezed. And without something that has a direct outcome, maybe that's more difficult. It's easy to see the result of a Bronco test, so you can reward your strength and conditioning coach, but it's very difficult to see a happier player. So would you bother with a well-being coach, for example? So the physical load, I think, is being looked at. There's lots of data to deal with that. My bigger concern is around making people happier, people content, challenged, and enthusiastic about the job that they're doing.
And just sort of carrying on with this theme, Rachel, this is for you really, but you know, obviously right now, presumably you're getting some fantastic care, making sure you're getting all of that knee repaired. But once you retire, does the care continue? Does the club have some sort of connection to you to make sure that your well-being's still all right in the future, especially with all the dementia news we were hearing from Owain about earlier?
You know what, it's a really good question, and probably again within the women's game, something that's not been really looked at. We've had a number of international players who have retired internationally but still playing domestically, and there hasn't been any kind of mental health well-being support unless someone's cried out for it, which is probably where the mistake has already happened, hasn't it? That there hasn't been that initial support there, and now they're kind of crying for help. So I definitely think it's something that, it's not just a women's issue, it's a rugby issue. Mental health in rugby is something that we must continue to press on, and I hear Bruce on it, because it's so hard to measure. How do you measure that? And unless it's it's verbally being spoken about, when matters like that are often very personal. So yeah, I think it's an area that, from a player welfare perspective, that is something that does have to have funding and resource put into it, because we talk about just because you're not playing anymore, but we want everybody to stay in the game, whether that's coaching, refereeing, volunteering, getting in administration, wherever it be. We've got to keep looking after the people in the game, whatever avenue they go after rugby. And maybe that's why we don't hold on to many people, because they go, do you know what, I don't want to be in this environment anymore, and we lose them. So yeah, it's definitely an area that needs to have greater attention on, for sure.
And Owain, there's been a lot of talk recently about dangerous tackles. Can you keep up sort of with the rules and the regulations around all of this in your position of sort of reading and talking about rugby all the time? Well,
I said I've just mentioned that I've done a long kind of column with Ben Kay, who is kind of very well versed. He's regularly has communication with referees in his role as a BT Sport commentator, and it is said it's really technical. Players generally aren't trying to injure the ball carrier, and it's actually, I think it's the person doing the tackling who gets injured more than the ball carrier themselves. It's a bit like, if you look at in a car, you're driving along the road safely, and a cat jumps out in the road and you crash your car. You haven't aimed to crash that car, but like with a player changing direction, with a player who's ducking into contact, which is something else that needs to be looked at. We're in a professional game. Every law is analysed to the nth degree by a team within a professional setup, and the coach's aim, he's paid to just take an advantage of it. So every time you feel you've it's a bit like whack a rat, isn't it? Every time you feel like you've solved one issue, another issue comes up, because that's how a game evolves. But yeah, it's incredibly tough. I almost asked the question, would locks start to become an endangered species? Would these guys and girls I don't know how many girls are 6'8", 6'9", but you think of the kind of Martin Bayles, these enormous people, would they, because they can't get down low enough to tackle, was it below the armpit? Are we going to see players' shapes changing just to fit the new game? These are all questions I don't have the answers to, but it just shows you how complex it is.
And Rachel, from a player's point of view, you spend years and years learning a technique and getting that muscle memory going and understanding how you've got to do something, and then a rule change comes along. How does it affect you as a player? Does it take a while to kind of retrain your brain?
Of course it does, but a lot of players just get on with it. Like that's all they can do and all they can try and do. And Owen is spot on. No player goes out there intentionally trying to hurt anybody or do anything. And you have to realize players are making like decisions in split seconds. How am I closing that ball off? How am I going to stop that channel? What am I going to do? Go low here? Do I chop? Do I soak up? All these things going through your mind, and they're instantly changing. And a slight slip or a player ducking into the contact, it then puts you at risk, and you're trying to react in the time. And so it's difficult, and players do take a bit of time to adjust, but we all understand that we need to protect the heads completely. And I don't think there's any player going, do you know what, this is absurd, we should be able to take each other's heads off or anything like that. We're trying to make that player behaviour change, but it's also comes back to Owen saying there, coaches watch and dissect and pick apart to find a way to then manipulate it to then get their team an advantage. Ultimately that's what teams are trying to do to win the game. And so it is difficult, but as a player, whenever we've had a law change come in, we've adapted, we tried to find a way that it can benefit us. And then you just got to crack on.
And just a quick one to bring into this. There's been some talk in the press at the moment about some form of new gum shield that's going to kind of measure impacts and those kind of things for the head tackle and for concussion, all that sort of thing. Have you heard about this, Rachel?
Yes, you're right there, Bruce. And a little chuckle seamlessly brought in there. Yes, I do know about this. We've actually trialed this year. So ProTech Pro gum shields with OPro, and basically they've got a little chip in them, and it can help measure direct contact, all the impacts you've had, and it's real time as well. So your physio or whoever's kind of monitoring it can be on the sideline looking at the app and looking at the data. But then it also, what's the bigger picture of it is actually, so I play at the weekend, and let's say I had an enormous amount of impacts, not that cause concussion or anything to concern, but then to go, actually, do you know what? Tuesday and Thursday night, her load's going to be slightly taken back. So then actually I'm managing it over time, the amount of contacts and impacts that I'm having. So yeah, we've trialled with that. Harlequins men's were trialling it last year as well. Now it's come across into the women's game, which is, it's a real positive step to, again, like I said, about actually getting some data first and foremost in the women's game. We don't have enough. And then kind of how you can then look after the players once you have that actual data.
So that presumably is about coaching. I mean, that's using the data to coach better, is it?
Yeah, well, at least player load, look after the player. Like how much impact and how much load have they had during that game? Because obviously you used GPS to combine it. And then from that, the physios or the medical team could advise coaches, or the coach might go, nah, she's in for the full smash session. But you'd hope not. But yeah, it's to manage the player load. So it kind of comes under that whole player welfare bracket.
And Bruce, on coaches, when you're coaching, you're just nipping back into that kind of children and moving into sort of younger adults. How does a parent make sure that the coaches are qualified and are good enough to be making sure that those children are getting the right coaching?
Well, I think every institution, whether that be club or school, takes that very seriously, and unions have to monitor that, because now we're liable for the people under our care. So coaches have to go through updates regularly. We have first aid, and if you've not got a first aid trained person, then you have to bring in someone. I'm in a very fortunate position that we have on-site first aid, so the boys are very well looked after. But some of these things that are coming into the pro game, while I'm no lover of Sepp Blatter, one of the things he said when he was head of FIFA was that he wanted the game on a Sunday afternoon to be the same as the professional game. And for whatever reason, he was against various advances, but he wanted it to be the same game. And if you look at the game of football 50 years ago, it doesn't look that different from the game of football we're watching now, whereas the game of rugby is unrecognizable in almost every respect. The technology, the equipment they use, the kit they wear, and the laws. And one of my frustrations around the development of the game during the professional era was that the first thing we addressed was strength and conditioning. So players got much bigger and much faster, which changed the approach almost instantly. The next thing to come in were defence coaches. So we borrowed from rugby league, which then meant we lost a lot of depth to the game, and we filled the field and we looked at width. So we have this big, long, I call it a Toblerone line of defence, where you look to your side and you can only see one defender because they're all just lined up ready for, as Bart says, the smash session. And as a player, when I was a lad, I just made sure I got my flankers either side of me, so I wasn't involved in any of that nonsense. These two talking about smashed up noses and shoulders is not something I ever experienced. I had other people to do that for me. But that then took away space, which again denied certain players and certain types of players the chance to show what they could do. So the laws are a bit flawed at the moment, because the laws are what are bringing in these issues. And I feel for referees, because they could probably blow their whistle at every breakdown. They could blow their whistle at lots of tackles, and they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. I witnessed an absolutely brilliant bit of refereeing at an Edinburgh game at Murrayfield just very recently, where Edinburgh scored a length of the field try, fabulous episode of play, and it got brought back for TMO, and nobody had a clue what it was. But the Edinburgh flanker, young kid, Morris, had gone in to make a tackle, and the Ulster player had just dipped, not even at the last second, at the last 0.001 of a second, and there was contact with the head, and the referee ruled that there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. But possibly that could have been a yellow card and a penalty 60 metres back from the try being scored, and it was a nice thing that the referee was able to make a judgment, not that the player had been wrong, or the ball carrier, he hadn't done anything wrong either, but that injury was part of an unfortunate set of circumstances that, I think, as Burf said and Owen has said, you kind of sign up to when you take the field. The player didn't go out to do damage, tried to look after, was very, very low. I don't think could possibly have got any lower, but because of the circumstance, slipped and made contact with the head. So I thought it was a great bit of refereeing. In the kids' game, I don't think that's there, because the kids still play the way they're coached and they're taught. You tackle by the legs, you try and stay on your feet, and the referees, I think, referee accordingly, knowing that they've not got the watching eye of rewind, pause, 60,000 people watching a big screen plus all those at home. So I think referees are under a lot less pressure.
Well, it's that time now to move on to Owen, and let's have a quick catch up then on what's been happening with the Lions tour. We've seen the training camp going well in Jersey. The weather held good, I think. So what's happening now?
Well, I think about an hour ago, so they're having a virtual press session, which I've missed because I was doing some research. But yeah, I think it's all roads lead to Murrayfield at the weekend. Super Finn Russell is maybe going to be free to play in front of the masses up there. The Saracens boys, they all came off yesterday, having given so-called Ealing a little bit of a hiding, really. You can't really say anything else. So they're all going to be kind of getting shipped over. So it's going to be crazy day of sport, isn't it? Really, with a playoff final, and Wales are playing in the Euros. You may not have noticed, and there's a Lions game. It is the ultimate, summer of sport, isn't it? But yeah, I think South Africa, the Bulls got stuffed by Benetton, which nobody saw that coming. Bulls probably the strongest South African side, coached by Jake White. So maybe a bit of a wake-up call for South Africa, that they've got a bit of catch-up to be doing. But yeah, it's all the circus is on the road. I think we're going to be enveloped by Lions stuff before you know it.
And Rachel, how have you been enjoying it? Have you been keeping up?
Yeah, just being kind of on socials and stuff. I'm dead excited about it. Was it Sky Sports was on the other day and just highlighting it's going to be on this summer, and really excited. You can see the players are really buzzing to be in that environment and be a part of it. You saw the highs and the lows of it with Sinclair, and now he's involved, and I'm sure we're going to see a few more bodies get pulled into the Lions. But yeah, really can't wait for it to kind of kick off, really get going, and get behind it. It'd be exciting to have something to really get behind this summer.
And Bruce, I mean, coming to you then, it's happening up there in Edinburgh first. Are you going over for the match?
Yes, I shall be there. Very much looking forward to it. I think I've got Simon Shaw and Scott Hastings as my guests for the afternoon. So, yeah, very much looking forward to it.
That sounds terrible.
Yeah,
Why
rubbish,
are you not taking me and Owen?
Well, hey, now be careful, Burford. Be careful. We're doing this at the time that suits you, so don't you start making more demands on me.
How come I didn't get a ticket in all of that as well? Anyway, moving swiftly on. So Bruce, what do you think the game's going to be like up there?
I've got absolutely no idea, and that's what makes it so exciting. Japan, they've had a league, but they've been together in camp for a while. They arrived in Edinburgh a couple of days ago, so they're getting used to what we call summer here, which is probably bloody cold for them. Lions team, who knows, because this Lions team that plays will probably never play again as a group, because there's so many missing and so many things to happen between now and what comes next. I hope everyone gets through it. I think everybody needs to get on the plane to South Africa and at least feel like they're a Lion on tour. It'll be exciting to see if they can pick some Scottish players. That's one of the things that I think has probably made this exciting for everyone in the British Isles. We've not had a huge representation, and certainly not a realistic test representation other than Hoggy in the last couple, and he's been injured. So that's exciting. I think that also spices it up a little bit for the other nations to make it a bit more interesting and learn about new people. I'm delighted that Duan van der McMerve will get to go and play in his old country, now being a Scotsman. So great for guys like him to achieve something like that. And if Finn Russell gets to pull the strings at Murrayfield, it'll be fantastic. 16,000 people, so it's obviously not going to be packed, but from what I've seen, and the guys here have maybe been at live sport with a crowd, it seems like no matter how many are there, there's noise, there's atmosphere, the players are responding to it. So I'm really excited for it. I think the players will be. I think everybody just wants to pull on that red shirt and get busy and hopefully start to stake their claim, because there's not a huge amount of time.
And finally then, the final questions. We always have a little tie-up question at the end, but which player do you see wearing the number you last played in? So for you, Rachel, would it be Owen Farrell starting on the first test up there in Scotland? So who do you think is going to be the player that wears your number?
Oh, I don't know if Farrell will be straight in. Just he might be because he hasn't played as much rugby this season. I'm going to go for Bundy.
Okay, and Bruce, what was the last number you played in?
Well, I think the last time I played, we didn't have 8 subs on the bench, so I think I was probably number 22. So does that mean
Did say in my notes, have we got a bucket and sponge man playing at the weekend? But I didn't want to bring it up in case my ticket went lost again.
Yeah, I'll be the announcer. The last number I wore, well, I'd love to think Finn Russell is going to get to play as the test number 10, because to me that's going to be a statement about how they're going to play. So I would love to think it's going to be Finn Russell.
And Owen, how about you?
I'm going to say Tom Curry. I had last had a 7 on my back. He's very muscular. He's the sort of player you maybe could see being quite traditional to take on the Springboks. I could see Bruce thinking, where's Hamish Watson? But, you know, just in they got some good... Go on.
I love how you said he's very muscular.
Yeah, I like that too.
Yeah,
I didn't realise that was the criteria.
Like I thought he was going to say.
You know, he's Peter Stepney toys circularly say, you know, Gatland does prefer, you know, if he's got 2 guys of equal skill set, but one's half a stone heavier than the other and an inch taller, he generally goes with the more kind of blunderbuss kind of back rows, and Tom Curry is is an absolute mutant, isn't he? So that's my educated guess to be shot down now when we next meet up, I'm sure.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of wraps it up for this episode 2. And Rachel, I mean, from all of us, we just hope that the recovery goes well and everything gets better quick as possible.
Thank you, and I'll stop messing you guys around on times to get around my knee.
All good.
Excellent.
All good.
Well, thank you, everybody, and we'll see you for episode 3 in a month's time.